Captain Darius Corvin pressed his palm against the false bulkhead concealing military-grade plasma cannons, feeling the subtle vibration of charging capacitors through the reinforced steel. The UNS Meridian had begun life as a standard Hercules-class cargo hauler, but 3 months of desperate modification work had transformed her into something unprecedented, a warship disguised as prey. "Final systems check complete, sir," reported Lieutenant Marcus Dane, his voice carefully neutral despite the weight of their situation. The former artillery specialist had volunteered for this mission knowing full well that success would likely cost him his life. Around the converted cargo bay, 41 other ex-military personnel maintained the fiction of being civilian contractors, each man carrying falsified identification that would fool hegemony inspectors for exactly as long as their weapons remained concealed. Corvin studied the tactical display showing their position in the Kepler Junction, a shipping crossroads where 15 human cargo vessels passed daily through predictable navigation corridors. For 8 months, the Vaktar hegemony had been conducting what they termed compliance inspections of human merchant traffic, a systematic intelligence-gathering operation disguised as customs enforcement. The pattern had become horrifyingly clear once Earth intelligence broke their communication codes. Every inspection followed identical protocols: board the vessel, execute 2 or 3 crew members for alleged smuggling violations, then spend 6 hours documenting cargo manifests, route data, and drive signatures. The hegemony wasn't harassing human shipping. They were mapping Earth's entire logistics network in preparation for coordinated strikes against 12 major colonies. "Admiral Hayes was right about their timeline," Corvin muttered, reviewing the classified briefing materials that had convinced him to volunteer for what military analysts privately called a suicide mission. Intercepted hegemony communications indicated they needed only 6 more weeks of intelligence gathering before launching simultaneous assaults designed to cripple human expansion permanently. Chief Engineer Carlos Torres emerged from the concealed weapons bay, wiping grease from his hands with a satisfied expression. "The sensor masking array is holding steady, Captain. Their scanners will read us as a standard cargo hauler until we drop the camouflage." He gestured toward the false hull sections hiding their military modifications. "The real beauty is using their own stealth technology against them." The irony was indeed perfect. 6 months earlier, the hegemony raider Swift Judgment had attacked the colony transport New Beijing, killing 400 civilians before human naval forces could respond. The raider's wreckage had yielded samples of their sensor masking materials, exotic metamaterials that bent electromagnetic radiation around objects, rendering them effectively invisible to most detection systems. Earth's best engineers had spent months reverse engineering the technology, eventually developing a system that could disguise a warship's sensor signature as a completely different vessel type. The Meridian appeared to hegemony scanners as exactly what she claimed to be: a lightly defended cargo hauler carrying medical supplies to frontier colonies. "Sir," called communications specialist Jake Reeves from his station, "we're picking up hegemony transmission protocols on standard commercial frequencies. Inspection squadron inbound from bearing 27 Mark IV, estimated arrival in 37 minutes. Corvin felt his pulse quicken. After weeks of preparation, the trap was finally approaching. "All hands to stations. Remember, we're civilian cargo haul. Shares with a manifest full of medical supplies and terraforming equipment. No military protocols until I give the authorization code." Through the main display, he watched 4 contacts resolve from hyperspace distortion, 1 heavy cruiser flanked by escort destroyers, exactly matching intelligence predictions. The lead vessel's commander would be following established hegemony procedure: disable the target's engines, board with overwhelming force, conduct inspection activities that were actually detailed intelligence gathering, then depart after adding another data point to their invasion database. Lieutenant Dane checked his concealed weapons console, where targeting solutions were already being calculated by military-grade fire control systems hidden within cargo management computers. "All weapons charged and ready, sir. We have firing solutions on all 4 vessels." The psychological aspect of their mission troubled Corvin more than the tactical challenges. Success required convincing the hegemony that routine cargo inspections carried unacceptable risks, forcing them to abandon intelligence gathering before completing their invasion preparations. However, this meant his crew would face combat against superior numbers with limited hope of survival. Corvin had handpicked each volunteer after reviewing their service records and psychological profiles. Former Marines who had survived ground combat on hostile worlds, naval specialists with experience in asymmetric warfare, engineers who understood the desperate improvisation required when facing technologically superior enemies. Each man understood that their deaths might save millions of human lives by preventing the coordinated colony strikes. "Captain," Reeves reported, "Hegemony vessels are transmitting standard inspection demands. They're requesting we reduce engine power and prepare for boarding in accordance with expansion zone regulations." The lead cruiser was the relentless Tide, commanded by Veltoth, a career officer known throughout Heg, Emony space for his methodical approach to intelligence operations. Earth intelligence had studied his inspection patterns for months, noting his preference for extended technical analysis of human fusion drive systems. Today, that professional thoroughness would prove costly. "Acknowledged, hegemony vessels," Corvin replied, allowing appropriate nervousness to color his voice. "This is Captain Corvin of the merchant vessel Meridian. We are carrying humanitarian medical supplies under Galactic Commerce Protection statutes. Please state the nature of your inspection requirements." Veltoth's response crackled over the communications array with confident authority. "Human vessel, you will submit to compliance inspection per hegemony regulations. Reduce engine power to minimum levels and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in crew termination and vessel confiscation." Corvin exchanged glances with his senior staff, each man knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether Earth's colonies lived or died. The hegemony had grown comfortable with their inspection routine, never imagining that humans might fight back with the same methodical planning they used for intelligence operations. "Compliance acknowledged," Corvin replied, "reducing engine power now." Around him, his crew moved through their deception with professional precision, maintaining civilian covers while quietly preparing for the most desperate gambit in human military history. The Hegemony heavy cruiser. Relentless Tide moved into inspection formation with practiced efficiency, her sensor arrays conducting detailed scans of what appeared to be another routine target. Commander Veltoth studied the tactical displays with satisfaction, noting the human vessel's compliance with boarding procedures and the complete absence of military-grade emissions from their supposedly civilian systems. "Maintain standard protocols," Veltoth instructed his boarding coordinator. "However, Intelligence Command has flagged this vessel's fusion drive configuration as potentially valuable. Conduct extended technical analysis before departure." He paused, reviewing the Meridian's manifest data. "Medical supplies and terraforming equipment, typical human expansion materials. Execute full documentation procedures." The first boarding shuttle launched from the cruiser's ventral docking bay, followed by two more carrying inspection teams and technical specialists. Each craft followed approach vectors calculated to minimize the human vessel's options for evasive action, though Veltoth expected no resistance from what appeared to be a standard cargo hauler with minimal defensive systems. On the Meridian's bridge, Corvin watched the approaching shuttles with carefully concealed tension. "Lieutenant Dane, confirm all weapon systems are ready, but remain powered down until my direct authorization." "Confirmed, sir," Dane replied from his concealed station. "Plasma cannon arrays charged, electronic warfare suite on standby, decoy systems prepared for launch." The former artillery officer's hands remained steady, despite knowing that their next few decisions would determine whether Earth's colonies survived the coming months. Chief Torres monitored the sensor masking systems that kept their true capabilities hidden from hegemony scans. The exotic metamaterials coating their hull bent electromagnetic radiation in precisely calculated patterns, presenting sensor signatures identical to genuine civilian vessels. However, the masking technology consumed enormous amounts of power and could be maintained for only limited periods before thermal buildup made detection inevitable. 2 kilometers and closing, reported sensor specialist Williams. Boarding shuttles are following standard approach protocols. No indication they suspect anything unusual about our configuration. Corvin felt sweat gathering at the base of his neck despite the bridge's controlled atmosphere. Everything depended on precise timing. Too early, and the hegemony vessels could retreat beyond effective weapons range before sustaining significant damage. Too late, and boarding parties would discover their deception before the trap could spring with maximum psychological impact. The boarding shuttles reached 1 kilometer distance, their pilots following routine procedures that had worked flawlessly during hundreds of previous inspections. Veltoth's confidence in the operation was justified by 8 months of successful intelligence gathering. No human vessel had ever offered meaningful resistance to hegemony boarding actions. "Sir," Williams announced, "boarding shuttles are powering down weapon systems per standard non-combat approach protocols. They're treating this as a routine inspection." Perfect. The hegemony's assumption that human cargo vessels posed no military threat was about to prove catastrophically wrong. Corvin took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either save Earth's frontier colonies or doom his crew to certain death in a gesture that might not even achieve its intended strategic impact. 500 meters and closing, Williams reported. Optimal firing range in 15 seconds. "All stations," Corvin announced quietly, "prepare for combat operations. Drop sensor masking on my mark." The transformation began with subtle mechanical sounds as hidden hull panels prepared to retract, revealing military-grade weapons systems that officially did not exist. Throughout the ship, former military personnel abandoned their civilian covers and assumed combat positions at stations designed to appear identical to standard cargo management equipment. "Lieutenant Dane," Corvin said, his voice carrying across the bridge with deadly calm, "you are authorized to engage enemy targets. Drop masking. All weapons free." The Meridian revealed her true nature in a burst of coordinated violence that caught the hegemony force completely unprepared. Hull panels retracted to expose plasma cannon arrays capable of vaporizing destroyers, while sensor masking systems shut down to reveal the electronic signature of a heavily armed warship where moments before only a cargo hauler had existed. The first salvo targeted the boarding shuttles at point-blank range, plasma bolts designed to overload their minimal shields and convert the craft into expanding clouds of superheated debris. 3 shuttles exploded instantly, their crews having no time to comprehend what had happened before being vaporized by weapons they never expected to encounter. The 4th shuttle's pilot, reacting with remarkable reflexes, managed to evade the initial barrage and begin emergency acceleration back toward the cruiser. However, the Meridian's secondary systems were already tracking his escape vector, point defense lasers bracketing his position with surgical precision until his craft joined the expanding debris field. "Target the escort destroyers," Corvin ordered, watching tactical displays show the hegemony formation breaking apart in confusion. "Concentrate fire on their shield generators." The Meridian's plasma cannons had been specifically modified to exploit a weakness in hegemony's shield technology discovered during analysis of captured equipment. Instead of maintaining continuous beam output, they delivered massive energy pulses designed to create catastrophic feedback through shield matrix systems, causing protective fields to collapse and expose vulnerable hull sections. The first destroyer caught 2 direct hits, center mass, and erupted in a brilliant explosion as its reactor core lost containment, the detonation visible across several light seconds of space. The second escort managed to raise combat shields just in time, but the plasma overload disabled its primary weapons array and left the vessel spinning helplessly with damaged maneuvering systems. "Holy shit," breathed communications specialist Reeves, forgetting military protocol as he watched their weapons systematically dismember vessels 3 times their size. "Sir, we're actually winning." Veltoth's voice cut through hegemony communication frequencies with urgent authority. "All units, combat formation immediately. Target the human vessel with all available firepower. This is not a standard inspection. Repeat, this is active combat engagement. The heavy cruiser's main batteries opened fire, particle beams and plasma bolts streaking toward the Meridian with enough combined energy to level city blocks. Corvin's ship shuddered under the impact, her military-grade shields holding but showing alarming power drain readings as defensive systems struggled to dissipate the massive energy bombardment. Damage report, Corvin demanded as his ship bucked under repeated impacts. Shields holding at 60% capacity, Torres called from engineering. Hull integrity maintained, but we're taking serious power drain. Estimate 8 minutes before shield failure if this bombardment continues. Return fire from the remaining destroyers began bracketing their position, forcing evasive maneuvers that strained the converted cargo vessel's structural integrity. The Meridian had been designed for stealth and surprise attack, not sustained combat against superior numbers and firepower. Weapons status? Corvin asked. Plasma cannons operating at full capacity, Dane reported. However, we're facing thermal buildup issues. Continuous fire for more than 10 minutes risks catastrophic system overload. Corvin studied the tactical display, calculating odds that grew worse with each passing second. The Meridian had achieved complete surprise and eliminated half the hegemony force, but Veltoth's cruiser possessed overwhelming advantages in armor, firepower, and crew numbers. In a prolonged engagement, the Q-ship would be systematically destroyed. However, the mission's primary objective had already been achieved. The hegemony commander had witnessed a standard cargo vessel transform into a military threat capable of destroying escort destroyers. Word of this engagement would spread through their intelligence networks, making every future inspection a potential combat operation requiring significant force commitments they could not spare. The real question now was whether they could survive long enough to ensure the psychological impact reached maximum effectiveness. The Meridian shuddered as another concentrated salvo from Veltoth's cruiser punched through her weakening shields, the impact throwing Corvin against his command chair with bone-jarring force. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout the ship while damage control teams rushed to contain fires erupting from overloaded power conduits. His tactical display painted a brutal picture, shields down to 30% capacity, maneuvering thrusters critically damaged, and plasma cannon arrays approaching dangerous thermal levels. Engineering report, Corvin demanded, wiping blood from a cut above his left eye where flying debris had caught him during the last impact. Starboard maneuvering cluster is completely destroyed, Chief Torres replied over the intercom, his voice tight with strain. Port thrusters are operating at 40% capacity with significant power fluctuations. Sir, we can't maintain evasive patterns much longer without risking complete propulsion failure. Through the main view screen, Corvin walked. He'd the hegemony heavy cruiser, relentless tide adjusting its attack vector, moving to close-range engagement where its superior armor plating would prove decisive against the Meridian's lighter construction. Veltoth was no fool. He had quickly recognized the Q-ship's plasma cannons as short-range weapons requiring significant charging cycles between shots, making them vulnerable to sustained bombardment at close quarters. Sir, Lieutenant Dane reported from the weapons console, his face illuminated by warning indicators. Plasma cannon thermal levels at 94% capacity. We need immediate shutdown for cooling cycles, or we risk cascading system failures that could take out half our power grid. The tactical situation was rapidly becoming impossible. The Meridian could not outrun the remaining hegemony vessels with damaged propulsion, nor could she maintain effective fire for more than 3 minutes without catastrophic weapon overloads. However, the mission's primary objective, demonstrating that human cargo vessels posed genuine military threats, required more than merely damaging a few escort destroyers. Corvin studied the engagement with the analytical precision that had earned him command rank in Earth's merchant marine before volunteering for this desperate mission. Veltoth's cruiser represented the hegemony's primary intelligence-gathering platform, equipped with sophisticated sensor arrays and staffed by technical specialists whose survival would allow them to develop countermeasures against Q-ship tactics. The psychological impact Earth Command needed required something more dramatic than a typical space engagement. The hegemony had to believe that every routine inspection carried the risk of catastrophic losses, not merely the destruction of expendable escort vessels. "All stations," Corvin announced, his voice carrying across the bridge with calculated determination. "Prepare to implement Operation Last Resort. This is not a drill." His crew exchanged grim glances. They had trained extensively for this contingency during the past 3 months, but hoped never to execute protocols designed for maximum strategic impact, regardless of tactical survival. Operation Last Resort represented the Q-ship program's ultimate psychological warfare gambit, a demonstration that humans preferred mutual destruction to capture. "Communications," Corvin continued, "begin broadcasting fake distress signals on all hegemony military frequencies, indicate imminent reactor breach, crew evacuation in progress, standard emergency protocols." "Understood, sir," replied Reeves, his fingers flying across console controls as he transmitted carefully crafted messages designed to suggest the Meridian was suffering catastrophic system failures. The distress calls followed authentic Earth emergency procedures, lending credibility to the deception. Simultaneously, Torres began venting plasma coolant through damaged hull sections, creating brilliant streamers of superheated gas that provided visual confirmation of the fake distress signals. Emergency beacons activated throughout the ship, their automated distress codes broadcasting standard warnings about imminent reactor core breach and vessel destruction. The hegemony response was immediate and predictable. Veltoth's cruiser adjusted course, moving closer to the apparently dying human vessel, while technical teams prepared for emergency salvage operations. Standard military protocols required capturing any enemy ship containing valuable technology before total system failure occurred. Exactly the reaction Earth Command had anticipated when developing Operation Last Resort. "Sir," Dane reported quietly, "the cruiser is approaching optimal range for final modification deployment. Recommend immediate activation." Corvin nodded, placing his hand on the concealed control system built into his command chair. The Meridian's most classified modification lay hidden beneath reinforced cargo bay doors. A military-grade ramming prow constructed from depleted uranium and titanium alloys, designed specifically for suicide attacks against capital ships. The prow could penetrate even heavy cruiser armor at sufficient velocity, though doing so would destroy both vessels. "Deploy ramming configuration," Corvin ordered. The Meridian's forward section transformed with mechanical precision that spoke to months of careful engineering work. Cargo bay doors retracted in sequence to reveal the massive ramming prow, its angular surfaces designed to concentrate impact energy into armor-penetrating force. Structural supports locked into combat position while the ship's main engines ignited at maximum output, accelerating directly toward the hegemony cruiser's bridge section. Through the main view screen, Corvin could see individual windows on the Relentless Tide's command tower, imagining Veltoth's shock as he realized the human captain intended mutual annihilation rather than surrender. The psychological impact would be enormous, proof that humans considered death preferable to capture, making future inspections psychologically terrifying for hegemony crews. "Human vessel," Veltoth's voice crackled over communication frequencies, carrying unprecedented urgency. "Halt your approach immediately. We can negotiate terms for crew transfer and—" "Commander Veltoth," Corvin interrupted, his voice broadcast on all military channels. "I am Captain Darius Corvin of the United Nations ship Meridian. You have 60 seconds to withdraw your remaining forces before I ram your vessel. This engagement is being recorded and transmitted to both our governments for historical analysis." The hegemony cruiser's engines fired desperately, attempting to break away from the collision course, but the Meridian's trajectory had been calculated with mathematical precision. At current velocities and distances, ramming was inevitable unless one commander made dramatic course changes that would expose his vessel to devastating close-range weapons fire. Veltoth found himself trapped in an impossible tactical situation that threatened to destroy his military career along with his ship. His original orders required capturing the human vessel intact for technical analysis, but the Meridian was positioned for a ramming attack that would reduce both ships to expanding debris fields. Retreat would represent mission failure and potential court-martial, while maintaining course guaranteed mutual destruction. Captain Corvin, Veltoth transmitted after several tense seconds. I propose alternative resolution under traditional hegemony military law. Single combat between ship commanders, winner claims both vessels and surviving crews. This follows established honor protocols for avoiding unnecessary mutual destruction when tactical situations reach impasse. Corvin smiled grimly. Earth intelligence had provided extensive briefings on hegemony cultural practices, including their ritualized combat traditions derived from ancient gladiatorial customs. Veltoth's proposal served Earth's strategic interests perfectly. Regardless of personal combat outcome, the hegemony military would witness humans fighting their champions as equals, undermining the species' superiority complex that justified their expansion policies. Acceptable terms, Corvin replied, allowing the ramming course to continue for several more seconds before finally adjusting trajectory to parallel the cruiser's flight path. Combat will be broadcast live to both fleets using standard military frequencies. Winner assumes command of all vessels and personnel present. The trap had evolved beyond Earth Command's original planning, but the psychological warfare potential remained enormous. The hastily converted cargo hold of the Meridian buzzed with tension as both crews prepared for single combat that would determine far more than the fate of two ships. Portable broadcast equipment surrounded the makeshift arena, quantum entanglement communicators transmitting live footage simultaneously to Earth Command and throughout the Hegemony Fleet network. The stakes transcended personal survival. This duel would influence the relationship between species for generations. Commander Veltoth stood at the arena's perimeter, his imposing 7-foot frame examining traditional hegemony combat weapons with professional assessment. The curved blade, called a Veltar, gleamed under harsh lighting, its monomolecular edge capable of slicing through personal armor like tissue paper. Beside it lay secondary weapons, a weighted net designed to entangle opponents and a smaller knife for close-quarters finishing techniques. You comprehend the full implications of this combat, human, Veltoth said, his voice carrying the confident authority of a warrior who had never lost ritual combat. Should you somehow defeat me, hegemony military law requires my surviving crew to acknowledge your rightful command authority. Should I defeat you, as expected, your vessel becomes legitimate property of the Hegemony Fleet. Corvin nodded while stripping off his uniform jacket, revealing the lean, scarred physique of a former Earth Marine whose service record included 3 years of ground combat operations on Kepler-4. Those campaigns had taught human forces harsh lessons about fighting indigenous predators using improvised weapons and unconventional tactics, experience that might prove decisive against an opponent trained in ceremonial combat traditions. I understand the terms completely, Corvin replied, selecting the Veltar and testing its balance with careful movements. The weapon felt alien in his hands, but its weight distribution reminded him of machetes used during jungle warfare operations where survival depended on adapting to unfamiliar equipment under life-threatening circumstances. However, Corvin continued, I propose one critical modification to standard protocols. This combat will be broadcast throughout hegemony military networks, not merely to ships present in this engagement. Veltoth's eyes narrowed as he recognized the propaganda implications. The human captain was transforming ritual combat into psychological warfare, ensuring that thousands of hegemony warriors would witness the outcome. Even Corvin's defeat might undermine fundamental assumptions about human military capabilities if he demonstrated sufficient skill and courage. Your proposal is acceptable, Veltoth replied after moments' consideration, his warrior's pride preventing any appearance of concern about broader observation. Initiate transmission to all Hegemony Fleet frequencies. Let our forces witness proper combat between worthy opponents. The duel commenced with traditional hegemony ritual, both combatants offering formal bows before assuming combat stances taught in military academies throughout their space. Veltoth moved with fluid grace of a natural predator, his Veltar cutting precise arcs through the air as he tested Corvin's defensive reactions and spatial awareness. The Hegemony Commander's technique reflected generations of refined warrior traditions, each movement following patterns developed through centuries of ritualized combat. His attacks flowed seamlessly between offensive strikes and defensive positions, seeking openings in his opponent's guard while maintaining perfect balance and control. Corvin adopted a completely different approach rooted in practical military violence rather than ceremonial technique. His Marine training emphasized efficient brutality designed to disable enemies quickly through any means necessary, dirty fighting that recognized no rules beyond survival and mission completion. When Veltoth launched his first formal attack sequence, a flowing combination of blade strikes aimed at testing Corvin's defensive capabilities, the human captain responded by scooping up a handful of metal debris from the damaged cargo hold and hurling it directly into the alien's face with practiced accuracy. The improvised attack violated every principle of honorable combat, catching Veltoth completely off guard as sharp fragments struck his eyes and forced involuntary flinching. While the Hegemony Commander struggled to clear his vision and maintain proper stance, Corvin closed distance aggressively and drove his knee into Veltoth's solar plexus with bone-crushing impact. "You fight without honor or dignity," Veltoth gasped, blood trickling from cuts around his eyes where metal fragments had found their mark. "I fight to win," Corvin replied grimly, following his advantage with an elbow strike to the jaw that sent the larger warrior staggering backward. "Honor becomes irrelevant when species survival is at stake." The next 10 minutes became a brutal education in the fundamental differences between ceremonial combat and military survival training. Veltoth possessed obvious advantages in height, reach, and pure physical strength, his Veltar opening several painful cuts across Corvin's arms and torso as the human pressed inside the weapon's optimal range. However, Corvin's willingness to exploit environmental hazards, use improvised weapons, and employ psychological tactics gradually offset his opponent's physical superiority. He used damaged cargo containers as shields and obstacles, forcing Veltoth to fight in confined spaces that negated his reach advantages while creating opportunities for surprise attacks. The human captain exploited every expectation about honorable combat, feinting surrender before launching surprise strikes that left the Hegemony Commander increasingly frustrated and desperate. When Veltoth expected formal blade work, Corvin threw twisted metal fragments. When the alien anticipated direct confrontation, the human used cargo equipment to create tactical advantages. "Stand still and fight properly," Veltoth roared, his professional composure cracking under pressure of unconventional tactics that violated everything he understood about combat. "This is how humans fight properly," Corvin replied, using a damaged support beam to block an overhead strike before pivoting to deliver a devastating kidney punch. "We adapt, we improvise, we survive." The decisive moment arrived when Veltoth, bleeding from multiple wounds and exhausted by Corvin's relentless pressure, attempted a final ceremonial killing technique, an overhead blow designed to split opponents from skull to sternum in demonstration of warrior superiority. Corvin caught the descending blade with both hands, accepting deep cuts to his palms in exchange for controlling the weapon's trajectory, while Veltoth remained committed to the attack and unable to retreat. With the Hegemony Commander overextended and off balance, the human captain drove his forehead into the alien's nose with skull-crushing force. Veltoth collapsed heavily, his Veltar clattering across the deck plates as consciousness faded. Blood pooled beneath his head, while Corvin stood over his defeated opponent, breathing heavily and dripping crimson from a dozen wounds, but unmistakably victorious. "I claim victory by right of combat," Corvin announced to the broadcast equipment, ensuring his words reached every Hegemony vessel monitoring the transmission. Commander Veltoth fought with courage and demonstrated warrior skills worthy of respect. I accept command of his forces while acknowledging his honorable service. Throughout the hegemony fleet network, thousands of warriors watched in stunned silence as fundamental assumptions about species hierarchy crumbled before their eyes. The human had not won through superior strength or speed, but through adaptability, ruthless efficiency, and tactical innovation that suggested humanity represented a far more dangerous opponent than previously believed. The footage would spread across hegemony space like wildfire, carrying implications that would reshape interstellar politics for decades to come. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood in Earth Command's secure briefing amphitheater 6 weeks after the Battle of Kepler Junction, studying holographic displays that showed a transformed strategic landscape across 3 star systems. Intelligence reports from across hegemony space painted a picture of an enemy alliance in complete disarray, their expansion plans shattered by psychological warfare more effective than any conventional military victory. "The footage has exceeded all strategic projections," reported Colonel Sarah Martinez from Intelligence Division, her voice carrying barely concealed amazement. Within 72 hours of Captain Corvin's combat transmission, Hegemony Command issued fleet-wide orders terminating their inspection program indefinitely. They've recalled patrol squadrons from forward positions and established defensive perimeters around core worlds. Hayes nodded, reviewing classified assessments that detailed the psychological impact of watching their respected commander defeated by human unconventional tactics. The sight of Veltoth, a warrior who had never lost personal combat, being systematically outfought by adaptive human techniques had shattered fundamental assumptions about species superiority that formed the ideological foundation of hegemony expansion doctrine. More significantly, Martinez continued, activating additional displays showing political fractures within the alliance, we're detecting systematic breakdown of hegemony political unity. The warrior caste, supporting aggressive expansion, is facing unprecedented challenges from civilian leadership, questioning the wisdom of provoking a species capable of defeating their champions in personal combat. The intelligence reports detailed intercepted communications between member worlds, revealing heated debates about humanity's true military capabilities and the strategic implications of continued conflict. Some faction leaders demanded immediate peace negotiations, while others called for massive military escalation to restore their species' damaged reputation. However, the critical intelligence failure caused by abandoning their inspection program had left them unable to execute coordinated strikes against human colonies. Admiral Hayes activated another holographic array showing human colonial space, where green indicators marked newly deployed defensive installations and patrol networks. Earth Command used the operational pause to reinforce threatened systems with our strategic reserves. The 12 colonies they plan to attack simultaneously are now protected by overlapping defense grids and automated weapon platforms. The strategic transformation was remarkable. In 6 weeks, humanity had evolved from defensive posture focused on protecting scattered settlements to organized military presence capable of challenging hegemony expansion throughout the frontier sectors. The Q-ship program had not only prevented immediate invasion, but provided time for implementing comprehensive defensive improvements across human space. The briefing room doors opened to admit newly promoted Admiral Corvin, his left arm still supported by medical braces from injuries sustained during CNA's Ingle combat with Veltoth. The promotion ceremony had taken place 3 days earlier, recognizing his tactical innovation and personal courage in fundamentally altering the balance of interstellar power through one perfectly executed psychological warfare operation. "Admiral," Hayes said, gesturing toward displays showing current hegemony fleet positions, "your mission analysis recommended expanding Q-ship operations throughout contested sectors. Intelligence confirms that hegemony forces are now treating every human cargo vessel as potential military threat, requiring full combat protocols." Corvin studied the tactical data with analytical precision that had made him successful in both civilian merchant service and military operations. The psychological impact had exceeded Earth Command's most optimistic projections, creating exactly the strategic paralysis they had hoped to achieve through demonstrating hidden human capabilities. The program's continued effectiveness depends on maintaining uncertainty about which vessels carry concealed weapons, Corvin explained, manipulating holographic controls to highlight shipping routes and patrol patterns. We need to deploy genuine cargo ships alongside Q ships, forcing the hegemony into impossible tactical decisions that exhaust their resources regardless of choices made. Elaborate on the strategic implications, Hayes requested. If they inspect every human vessel with military-grade force commitments, they'll deplete their patrol capacity within months while accomplishing minimal intelligence gathering, Corvin said, highlighting resource allocation data. If they avoid inspections entirely to prevent encountering Q ships, they forfeit the intelligence necessary for planning effective military operations. Either choice serves our strategic objectives. The genius of the strategy lay in its elegant simplicity. The hegemony now faced the same intelligence dilemma that had originally threatened human colonies. They could not distinguish between legitimate cargo vessels and hidden warships without conducting inspections that might prove catastrophically expensive in ships and trained personnel. Colonel Martinez activated additional displays showing intercepted hegemony military communications. We're monitoring increasing resistance within their command structure to inspection duty assignments. Junior officers are refusing such missions, claiming the risk of encountering Q ships makes them equivalent to suicide orders without strategic justification. Hayes smiled with grim satisfaction. The psychological warfare aspect of Corvin's mission had achieved effects that conventional military victory could never accomplish. By demonstrating human willingness to engage hegemony champions in personal combat using unconventional tactics, the Q-ship program had transformed humanity's image from prey species to dangerous adversary deserving of cautious respect. A priority communication alert interrupted the briefing, bringing news that would reshape interstellar politics. "Sir," an aide announced, entering with encrypted transmission data, "we're receiving formal diplomatic overtures from two hegemony member species. The Kethvar and Morden governments are requesting separate peace negotiations with Earth Command, bypassing hegemony central authority entirely." The political implications were staggering. The four-species alliance that had threatened human expansion was fragmenting as individual members questioned the wisdom of continued conflict with opponents who had proven capable of defeating their military champions through superior adaptability and tactical innovation. Admiral Hayes studied the diplomatic protocols, recognized it, formal negotiation language indicating genuine peace overtures rather than tactical deception or intelligence-gathering attempts. Schedule preliminary discussions with both delegations. Make clear that Earth considers any agreement conditional on complete cessation of hostile activities against human settlements and shipping. Corvin reviewed the intelligence summaries with growing satisfaction tempered by realistic assessment of remaining challenges. The mission that had begun as desperate attempt to protect 12 colonies had evolved into comprehensive strategic victory, but maintaining that advantage would require continued vigilance and tactical innovation. The expanded Q-ship program will deploy 30 vessels within 3 months, Hayes announced, with Admiral Corvin commanding operations throughout contested sectors. Our objective remains unchanged: convince potential aggressors that human space represents too dangerous a target for routine harassment or systematic invasion. 12 months later, the first formal peace treaty between humanity and a former hegemony member was signed aboard the fully rebuilt UNS Meridian, with Admiral Corvin serving as Earth's primary diplomatic representative. The ceremony included honor guards composed of former hegemony warriors who had requested transfer to human service after witnessing combat footage and deciding they preferred fighting alongside humans rather than against such resourceful opponents. The galaxy had learned fundamental truths about humanity through one perfectly executed mission. They were not species to be tested through gradual escalation or intimidated through displays of superior firepower, but potential allies worth courting and enemies deserving of cautious respect. The predator-prey relationship that had once threatened human civilization had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic politics, mutual respect between species that recognized each other's capacity for both honorable combat and innovative destruction. Standing on his ship's bridge months later, watching former enemies work alongside human crew members in genuine cooperation rather than fearful submission, Admiral Corvin reflected on the strange paths that led to lasting peace. Sometimes the greatest strategic victories emerged not from overwhelming firepower or technological superiority, but from simple willingness to fight when fighting seemed impossible, and extend respect to opponents who had earned it through courage rather than conquest. The Meridian continued her patrol duties, no longer disguised as a helpless cargo vessel, but proudly displaying her true nature as humanity's promise to the galaxy. Approach with peaceful intentions and find welcome, threaten human lives and discover why Earth's children had earned their place among the stars through determination, innovation, and the unshakable conviction that freedom was worth any price asked of those brave enough to pay it.